The United States and a bunch of other countries are in a lot of debt. Japan, for example, has a debt to GDP ratio of over 260%, the highest of any developed country. But if you visit Japan for any reason, you'll notice that it's actually very nice there. The cities are modern and clean, crime isn't too big of an issue, and nowadays there aren't many nuclear accidents either. Sure, Japan still faces some issues, which Logan Paul documented in 2018, but despite its high debt, the country seems to be doing pretty well. So does debt even matter? And who exactly does the United States owe its debt to? It's May 2024, and you're watching the 4th episode of Money Boost. When you take out a loan to buy a house or start a business, you usually take that loan from a bank. You then have to pay it back plus some interest, or the bank will come after you and your family with their hit squad. But countries in general don't take out loans from banks. They mostly borrow from their own citizens. This happens by selling government bonds, which basically are contracts saying that the government will pay the money back after a while and some interest on top. Now, those interest payments the government needs to pay are important to understand. Being in debt is not necessarily a bad thing. In the same way that people can take out loans to buy houses before actually having the money, governments can borrow money to faster develop their countries. If the borrowed money is wisely spent, it will easily pay off the debt with interest and continue generating money in the future. It's all fun and games as long as the economy keeps growing and the interest payments don't get too big. Hold on, this starts to sound like a pyramid scheme. The U.S. made a new record on its debt-to-GDP ratio this year by reaching 124%, and it's growing every day. But Americans have kind of been here before. During World War II, while the military spending was at a record high, the debt-to-GDP ratio reached 113%. But what followed the war back then was an economic boom and also rapid population growth. This increased the tax income, and together with lower military spending once the war was over, helped the U.S. reach debt-to-GDP rates as low as 24.6% in 1974. So the current situation isn't completely unheard of. Last time, the solution was to reduce spending and increase income. Hey Siri, remind me of this solution once I become the President of the United States.
There's no need to remind because the world will end in 5 years.
Okay. While Japan's economy didn't completely collapse or anything, the high debt they started to accumulate in the 1990s significantly slowed down economic growth. In the early 2000s, it was called Japan's lost decade, but the slow economic growth still continues to this date, now for over 30 years. In the United States, there has never been a period this long of economic struggles. People are used to growth, so it's easy to forget that it's not guaranteed it will continue forever. Did you know that from the 1960s to 90s, Japan achieved one of the highest economic growth rates in the world? In 1989, for example, the 6 most valuable companies in the world were all Japanese. If this economic growth and technological innovation never slowed down in Japan, we would surely have fully equipped anime girlfriend robots by now. But what exactly happened in Japan? Why did the economy slow down so much once the country reached high debt levels? During the late 1980s, while the economy was still going strong, Japan experienced a massive bubble in real estate and stock prices due to easy loans. But by the early 90s, this bubble started to burst. The prices of real estate and stocks fell quickly. Suddenly, many banks in Japan were left with massive amounts of non-performing loans. This led many banks into crisis mode, which caused them to stop loaning money, which in turn slowed down economic growth even further. The debt started to grow at concerning speeds. Borrowers couldn't pay back their loans, while the interest payments kept piling up. The Bank of Japan and the government did respond by adjusting their monetary policies, but their efforts were criticized as being too slow, insufficient, and poorly targeted. It was like coming to put out a forest fire with a fire extinguisher, but a day too late and then aiming at the only tree that somehow didn't burn down. In 1998, interest payments accounted for about a quarter of Japan's national budget. And it wasn't just the government that was in debt. Many companies also faced the same issue, causing them to focus on paying off their debt rather than investing in growth. But without economic growth, it wasn't easy. Just during the 90s, an estimated 140,000 companies went bankrupt in Japan. For Americans, that's about 1,950 football fields if each company is 5 feet long. As the economy slowed, Japan also faced another significant challenge: deflation, meaning a general decline in prices, which might sound good at first, but it can be a difficult cycle to get out of. When prices drop, consumers and businesses often delay purchases, expecting even lower prices in the future. This reduced spending leads to further economic slowdown, making it even harder for companies to pay off their debts and for the government to collect taxes. Imagine you're at a store and you know the TV you want is going to be cheaper next month. You wait. Now imagine everyone is waiting for everything. That's deflation. And it's not just about TVs, it's about houses, cars, business investments, like starting a drug manufacturing operation in your basement, you name it. While Japan was having all these issues, its population was also getting old. Fewer working-age people means lower productivity and higher costs for Social Security and healthcare. With fewer people in the workforce, there's less economic output to help service the debt. But back to the present, the land of the free. The United States faces its own set of challenges. While our debt-to-GDP ratio is rising, the situation isn't exactly the same as Japan's. For one, the US dollar is the world's primary reserve currency, giving the U.S. more flexibility. Plus, the U.S. has a larger and more diverse economy, which can help absorb shocks. But the U.S. should still be very careful. High debt can limit a country's ability to respond to future crises. If interest payments grow too large, they can crowd out other important government spending, especially if economic growth slows down. So there has to be a balance, using debt to invest in the future, but not so much that it becomes a burden. So, does debt even matter? Well, yes, but actually no. This was the 4th episode of Money Boost. Thanks for watching, and have a nice life.